released in 1960, The Magnificent Seven seemed like just another Hollywood production line shoot-'em-up. Yet, it went on to spawn 3 sequels and a hit television series. Today, it is a much-loved classic. The Magnificent Seven launched the careers of several major movie stars, Elmer Bernstein's unforgettable theme, and a saddleback full of great lines.
That was the greatest shot I've ever seen.
The worst. It was aiming at the horse.
The Magnificent Seven was a pivotal movie, poised between the Western's golden age and its death by television.
In other Westerns, it was more, shoot 'em up, but this was about the morality issue of being a gunslinger. I mean, you could see when he's speaking to Yul Brynner and they're talking to the young guy, they say families don't have any, children don't have any, you have no place to go. I mean, it was unheard of to talk about that back then.
Places you're tied down to, none. People with a hold on you, none. Men you step aside for, none.
Insults swallowed, none. Enemies, none.
No enemies?
Alive.
In terms of the Western, it was the beginning of the end of the great American Westerns. Look, in 1959 you had Rio Bravo. In 1960 you had The Magnificent Seven. Literally 4 or 5 years later, now you had Sergio Leone coming on the scene with his Clint Eastwood Westerns, which basically was the death knell of the Western. That was transformed it into something else. By that time, television and Italian spaghetti Westerns had kind of done it in. So it's kind of the last hurrah.
It is ironic that one of the most original and influential movies to come out of Hollywood should itself be a direct remake of another film, Akira Kurosawa's The Seven Samurai.
To my mind, The Seven Samurai is the greatest film ever made. It's like all of Shakespeare wrapped into one film. It's a great action film. It's a great character drama. It's a great moral story. It's the cinematography, the editing, the music, fantastic.
It was the first Japanese film that I'd ever seen. I saw it, I think, probably about 12 times in about 12 days. I was taken to see it, and I took everybody that I knew to see it.
I felt that it was one of the great Westerns of all time, only it was made by the Japanese, in the Japanese idiom. But the form and the whole design of it was an ideal Western.
This is perhaps no surprise, as Kurosawa was himself influenced by the Westerns of John Ford. But several people were to claim credit for deciding to remake the Japanese movie in Hollywood.
I got home and called my lawyer in Tokyo, who was a great friend of mine. With the difference of time, it was just right. I got him in his office, and I asked him to buy all the rights to The Seven Samurai. When I woke up the next morning, I had a cable confirming that I had acquired all the rights, and they were all mine. And of course, it was all done with the idea of making The Magnificent Seven out of it.
Brynner may well have spotted The Seven Samurai's potential, but it was the unknown Lou Morheim who beat him to the draw.
I can't pinpoint why I thought this would be a good American Western. All I knew was that that's the vision I had. When and how it occurred, I don't know. But I know that when I left the theater, I turned to my wife and I said, this would make a classic American Western.
In fact, it was Morheim and not Brynner who optioned the rights for a meager $250 and got the interest of Anthony Quinn.
Tony Quinn at the time was directing a movie starring Yul Brynner. And he had shown the movie to Yul Brynner. And Yul Brynner reacted like all of us that preceded him. My God, this is a magnificent movie.
Brynner bought Morheim's remake rights. According to a press report at the time, Quinn was to take the lead role. Morheim would produce, and Brynner, an accomplished photographer, would direct.
At one point he said he might direct it. But then I suppose he came in touch with the producers and the people who are in charge and they decide, I mean, why lose this great actor?
During the period I was on, it was always Yul. Yul was going down, and I was looking forward to it. I was very sorry that he never had a career as a director. I think he would have been a good one. He was a very good still photographer. He had a very good eye. He understood actors, and it's a shame, I think, that he never did.
Brynner called in director Martin Ritt, with whom he'd been working on The Sound and the Fury, to develop the project. Ritt hired screenwriter Walter Bernstein, a blacklist victim who had written 2 recent westerns. Bernstein's draft was close to the original Seven Samurai, the characters older and more world-weary. The 7 weren't gunfighters, but Civil War veterans.
Well, to start, the main character, the part that Yul played, I based much more on what the character was like in the Seven Samurai. There's the image that we had in mind was someone like Spencer Tracy, that is an older man and not as physical as the others. It was much more of a pastiche of the original film, I think, than what eventually happened.
By the time Bernstein had finished his first draft, Ritt had left the project. It then passed to independent producer Walter Mirisch, who had experience in making westerns. Mirisch was one of Hollywood's new breed, outside of the studio system. Just like the characters in the movie, he set about assembling his own team of freelance professionals.
My first instinct was to call my friend John Sturges, who among many other westerns had made the gunfight at the OK Corral. We had recently concluded a deal with John, and I said to him that I thought I had found the ideal first property for us. We immediately began talking about possible writers, and John suggested Walter Newman.
As Walter Newman, who penned scripts for Ace in the Hole and The Man with the Golden Arm, took over writing duties, director Sturges asserted that he wanted the sole producer credit on the movie. This upset Lou Morheim, who filed a lawsuit. The Magnificent Seven moved downtown for a showdown at the courthouse.
I really worshipped this film, and having been responsible for the approach to the Japanese film, I wanted to be associated with this film as the producer. The Mirisch Company and United Artists came to me via their lawyer and said, what would you accept to settle? And so there was a settlement made where there was money paid and the credit was reduced from producer to associate producer. I was willing at that time to accept it because once you get into a courtroom, you have no idea what the outcome might be.
Morheim was not the only one gunning for the film's producers. Angry at being written out of the script once Sturges took over, Anthony Quinn sued Brynner and United Artists for $650,000 in damages. Quinn lost, but even Morheim's settlement proved a hollow victory, and he had no further involvement in the film he helped bring to the screen. It would be Sturges who would be forever credited with finding the Magnificent Seven.
Somebody said to me, what is the man you're playing? Well, describe to me in a few words your character. So I say, he's just a dirty bum. There are only 2 clean things about him: his gun and his soul. And that's really what makes a Western. Your hero has to be just like that.
With Brynner clearly the star of the Magnificent Seven, director Sturges began to search for the rest of the film's cast.
And he's the one that picked those young, unknown kids like Steve McQueen, Jimmy Colburn, Charlie Bronson and company. He's the one who picked them.
I think that John Sturges was one of those guys who always said, when you cast a picture, be careful of the gut. Never mind the head, he meant the stars. Be careful of the middle of the cast. That's where you got to have the strength. And if you look at his pictures, that's where they were. Bad Day at Black Rock and Gunfight and all those kind of pictures.
Several of the film's future cast were already known to Sturges. TV star Steve McQueen had worked on his war film Never So Few, as had Charles Bronson. Brad Dexter had been in Sturges's Last Train from Gun Hill. So that he could have time off from his television show to do The Magnificent Seven, Steve McQueen was forced to fake an accident.
Steve wanted to do this. He said, I've got to get out, but got to make it look like an accident. So I'm in the car with him, and he says, okay, you ready? I said, yeah, I'm ready. What are you going to do? He said, I'm going to pretend like we crashed. Oh, okay. No seatbelts in those days. So he said, hold on as tight as you can. He crashed the damn thing, you know. And he had a gash here, whatever it was. But anyway, it worked.
Say, what's your name?
Make it Vin. What's your?
Chris.
But if McQueen thought he was to be the good-looking young gun, he found himself up against an ace face from Europe.
The word is out you're looking for men.
That's right. Men who are good with that.
I'm good with it.
Us?
Try me.
I aim to. Step in closer.
For an Easterner to get into a Western, this was the joke between Yul Brynner and me. We said, we're really the only Easterners in this Western.
Hold your hands like that. A clap. Faster. As fast as you can.
And he says, clap your hands. Yul wasn't really fast. I always had to wait for some to grab his gun.
I loved everybody in the movie. They were all great at the time actors, but the casting of the German actor as a Mexican was the strangest. And here he is playing this Latino, and it's what? This is a guy's a German. What's going on here? But after a while, you bought it.
More casting surprises were to follow when Sturges chose Broadway actor Eli Wallach for the role of the Mexican bandit chief, Calvera.
That's a mystery. It really is. I don't know how I was selected for this film. I think I was doing a film in California, and I got a call, and my agent said, go to see the director, John Sturges. And he said to me, I didn't have to read or anything. He said, I'd like you to be in this film. I said, I've seen the movie by Kurosawa called The Seven Samurai. What role do you see me in? He said, the head bandit. In the samurai film, the head bandit wears a black eye patch. You see the horse's hooves. He rides in and rides out. And I thought, that's a dull role. He said, read the script. I read the script, and I found that I rode into town with my 35 bandits and ride out. And I thought, I don't want to do that. But then I realized, for the next 35 minutes, all they talk about is he's coming back. They're getting him. His men are here. He's arriving. I thought, that's wonderful. I'll take the part.
Final casting proved critical as an actor's strike threatened to close down Hollywood.
I believe Yul Brynner was cast and Steve had been cast. And there was an actor's strike. It was going to occur at 5 p.m. I think it was a Friday afternoon. And I had just been nominated for the Academy Award. And this was in February of 1960. I said, I got a call from my agent and said, you've got to get over to see John Sturges. He said, well, there really isn't a role that could be said to be your role in this picture, but I can guarantee you, based upon your performance that you were nominated for, we're going to make a role worthwhile for you.
How much does the job pay?
I thought you were looking for the Johnson brothers.
I found them.
So basically, that's how it happened. Then I think I ran into Jimmy Coburn or something. I said, you know, they're casting over here for the Magnificent Seven. And Jimmy was an old friend of mine. We went to college together in the early 50s.
I ran into Robert Vaughn, who I'd gone to school with at Los Angeles City College. And he was coming out of the store, and I was going into the store. And I said, hey, man, what are you doing? Oh, I'm going to do the Magnificent Seven. So I figured, Jesus, that's great. When are you going to go? He said, well, no, it has to be cast by Saturday night because there's an actor's strike. I said, who's doing it? He said, John Sturges over at, so go see him. So I had my agent set up a meeting and went to see John. He said, but there's one of the seven that haven't been cast yet. And I said, well, what part is that, John? He said, that's Britt. He's the guy with the knife. I said, is that the counterpart of the greatest swordsman in Japan at that time? He says, yeah. He says, yeah, that's the guy. And I say, that's the one I want to play, John. And so he said, well, I'll let you know. And so I went home and I told my wife, my then wife, I said, I think I got a chance. I got a chance to play the character that I've always wanted to play, always loved. And at 3:30 he called me, he said, okay, Jim, come on over and pick up your knives. And, pow! It was like Christmas, Valentine's Day, and my birthday all rolled into one. It was just an enormously wonderful, joyous feeling.
With the cast in place, the production moseyed on down to Mexico. The Magnificent Seven was one of the few American films to escape the 1960 actors' strike because the cast had been signed, sealed, and delivered before the union's deadline.
He said, never mind, I'm in. Dirty dog.
The film's two major sets, the border town at the opening of the movie and the Mexican village, were built just outside the town of Cuernavaca. But filming in Mexico proved to be no fiesta.
Something had happened in Mexico shortly before we came down to do the movie. There was a movie called, with Gary Cooper, Veracruz it was called. The Mexicans were so upset by that depiction of Mexicans that they ripped the seats out of the theater and threw it at the screen. And they said, no more American movies down here.
Mexican actors and technicians were given key roles on the movie in a bid to smooth relations between Yankee filmmakers and the Mexican government.
I wasn't afraid of you. It's my father. He says, stay away from those men. They are brutes. They are cruel.
He's right. You know that? He's right.
Yo me acuerdo muy vagamente.
As I recall, the script had to be checked and revised very carefully to make sure that there were no images that denigrated the country.
They assigned a censor, actually, to sit on the set while the film was being shot. And we did have a certain amount of difficulty with the censor, which resulted really from a basic problem that they had with the premise of the film.
And was the script saying these people wouldn't fight against tyranny, so they had to go hire somebody to fight for them? That was the key, and the only key that ever came up that had to be dealt with.
The censors demanded one major script change to avoid insult to Mexican national dignity. Instead of seeking out gringo gunfighters to defend them, the villagers were only to buy guns for themselves. The hiring of the 7 warriors, once central to Kurosawa's plot, had now become an afterthought.
You must fight. Fight.
With machetes in bare hands against guns?
Buy guns. Buy? Go to the border. Guns are plentiful there.
They said to him, but why do you have to send to the Yankees? Why do you have to send across the border for the gunmen? And Sturges smiled and said, well, the movie company is putting up the money. That's why we have to do it.
We need help.
We must buy guns. We know nothing about them. Will you buy guns for us?
Guns are very expensive and hard to get. Why don't you hire men?
Men?
Gunmen. Nowadays, men are cheaper than guns.
I was playing a Mexican peasant. I was privy to a lot of conversations between these people in Mexican suits and the American suits. And their biggest concern was not to put the Mexican peasant in such a bad light. I was the only one in the American cast that spoke fluent Spanish, so I could communicate for them and translate with them.
One of the strange things that happened was the censor that was a lady censor. And we were shooting a scene, and we had a lot of the Mexicans were dressed in white with the red band, you know, and we had them dirtied down. And she said, "Oh no, no dirt on the costumes, no dirt on the white. They can't be seen with having any dirt. No, none of that." So we had to clean them all up, you know. And so if you ever, when you watch them, nobody has any dirt on them ever, but we get really dirty sometimes, but none of the Mexicans.
Because of the importance of the co-production, we had to get the film off the ground one way or another. It was good for the country. You were interested in making the film with us, so any problems that may have arisen were resolved positively and without any trouble.
Filming began on March the 1st, 1960, but it was clear from the first scene that the censor wouldn't be the only problem.
The first shot was in a creek. There were 3 or 4 rehearsals, which were 6 or 7 people in a row on horseback, just riding by and looking about from side to side. But when film was going through the camera, Steve swung out of the saddle with his hat, scooped up water from the stream, and doused it on himself. Next, I think, was Charlie Bronson, who unbuttoned his shirt, stretched, turned his bandana around. Then came Brad Dexter, who did 3 acts of Hamlet. And poor Yul didn't know what was going on behind him while everybody was trying to stake their ground into, this is going to be my picture, and I have 6 supporting cast. And John, the cigarette hanging from his mouth, never said cut or anything else. It's just his eyes got wider, and he turned and looked at me, and what he was saying was, can you believe that? We're going to go on for 6 or 8 weeks with these guys.
The set was fraught with testosterone. I mean, you know, here were these young Turks on the brink, you know, and they were all trying to get attention on the screen, you know, and especially Steve. Steve only had maybe 75 lines in the entire movie, you know. And so he was, as John liked to say, John Sturges, he was constantly catching flies, moving his hat, moving this way, moving that. And sometimes I watch a movie and I say, well, if I were you, I really would have been pissed off too.
Brynner, the established star, and McQueen, the up-and-coming next big thing, were soon heading for a standoff.
Then there was an interesting competition between Steve and Yul. Steve was a very, very clever actor, and he used to do it with a lot of shticks for the hands and doing the face and everything. He learned in a scene he would detract from the other actor by indulging in a lot of histrionics that had nothing to do with the character, but the camera and the audience were riveted on him. Steve was very good at that.
Steve was a real hustler type, you know. I mean, he was going to get what he wanted. So if he didn't have the lines, he was going to move every second, you know, to distract from Yul Brynner. And,
Brynner turned around to Steve and said, do this once more, and in any scene you have, all I have to do is take my hat off. And you won't be seen anymore. So Steve didn't do it. He didn't repeat it again.
There was a question of all of us wanting to best Brynner. I think that's what it came down to. We all wanted to some way take the picture away from Brynner. And then Steve would come in after a day shooting and he'd say, hey man, come over here. He said, did you see how big Brynner's gun is? His gun? I said, I didn't notice. He's got a bigger gun than anybody. The next day he'd say, come in, he said, hey, Brynner's got a horse. Did you see the size of that horse? It's a great big horse there. He said, it's going to make all of us look silly. And he was constantly, it sounds like a joke now, but he was very serious about it.
Brynner wasn't the only one in McQueen's sights. McQueen zeroed in on the script role assigned to young rival Horst Buchholz.
Steve McQueen would have preferred to have played that part rather than Horst. And there was a competition there, and Steve used to say to me, he said, that guy can't play that part. He said, I should be playing that part.
Steve McQueen. I couldn't take his guts.
Horst Buchholz was a European, so he wasn't real cowboy stuff.
If you remember the film well, if you remember, I was leaning down to get some fresh water in my face and drink it. And from that position, I saw the bull. I got off my horse, turned my hat like a Spanish bullfighter and started bullfighting. And John Sturges, he was thrilled. And that scene was not in the script. I liked it too. I liked the idea of Baka, venga, entrale.
John just thought he was great. He thought he was, and he shot more film on horse buckles than anybody else. And after the film was over, and I got all the notoriety about, the man with the knife. The man with the knife, he said, hell, everybody liked you in the thing. And I could never figure out that reason. I thought horse buckles was the kid.
The basic thing was that Sturges was able to mix all these diverse characters and personalities together, and from that there developed a kind of a competitiveness, but at the same time a likability between all of us.
I remember all the actors practicing, which they adored because they're like little boys, playing cowboys. And they'd all practice pulling the gun and the trigger and the shooting. They all loved it. I mean, you loved being on a horse, and all they wanted to do were cowboy movies.
There's a certain childish aspect to it. You always play a man who is 20 feet tall, and you shoot the Indians.
Yul didn't know anything about drawing guns or doing anything like that. Steve, of course, always wanted to be the really flashy kind of guy. It was fun.
Steve McQueen was wonderful with a gun, and Yul Brynner. They would do this. They'd take the gun and they'd spin it without looking, and it went. I'd have to look. I'd take the gun out and then look down to where to put it. It drove Sturges crazy, the director, but I said, I don't know how to do the gun. All I know is I'm going to shoot him.
One day, with blanks, of course, but one day I shot myself through the jeans. It went off. My thigh was all red and blue.
Not only were the guys into that boys will be boys mode, but the guys behind the cameras, like Bob Relier, he was incredible. I was on the set when they were filming that scene going down the street with Yul and Steve.
Second story window.
The curtain flicked a little bit.
I'm not in a good position. Let him stick his neck out.
That was Bob Relier behind it, and Steve fired with a live bullet, some live bullets. I said, God.
But despite the dangers of the set, filming progressed well. Off-camera rivalries were forgotten and friendships forged.
Well, no, morale was okay. We played an awful lot of poker and did an awful lot of drinking and eating Spanish food, Mexican food rather, and had a lot of laughs and we had a lot of fun.
I think that any of the still photographs that documented this are going to verify that if there was clanning, then the clanning fell into a couple of natural groups. One would be the McQueen-Bronson, as much as Charlie can hang out with somebody. Brad, you're going to see claned with Yul because somehow Yul, bless him, had figured out how to beat Brad in gin rummy. And that got to be endless.
Oh, yeah, we played for money. Yul and I played gin rummy against each other. We played, we gambled quite a bit on the set.
Brad Dexter was always losing, and he thought we were cheating. But he was not very good. We played poker, I was lousy, but then we played gin rummy, which I was pretty good at, and he was not very good. And, he was always losing.
I'll tell you, that experience of the Magnificent Seven, I made about 40 pictures. I had more fun on that picture than any picture I ever made.
Some friendships went much further. Eli Wallach found himself adopted by his bandit gang.
They were hired, and it was explained to them that they would be Eli's gang, etc. And they took over Eli, and one of the strangest things I've ever seen on a picture.
And each morning I'd arrive on the set, put on my outfit, and my 35 bandits would assemble with me, and we'd go riding for an hour. We'd ride along the hills, and it was wonderful, wonderful.
They were teaching Eli how to ride, but when you brought the horse in the morning, don't dare give it to Eli or hand him the reins. You gave it to one of the gang. They examined the cinch, and they examined this and that and checked the horse. When the prop man handed him his gun, don't hand it to Eli. You hand it to one of the gang who would examine it, be sure the chambers were empty. So they took the Calvera's gang thing to the nth degree.
I even frightened myself.
But Brynner went one step further in the bonding stakes when he and his fiancée Doris tied the knot on set.
The party of my wedding was the same party as the village party in the movie to welcome the Magnificent Seven. And this one was to welcome Magnificent Two. So they used the same props they used in the movie. Fantastic, only they do that.
Yul and Doris sat on a slightly elevated stage, as I recall, and received, rather like the Pope. And I didn't kiss his ring. I don't even think I went up on the stage, but I know Steve didn't want any part of it at all.
But for the filmmakers, the honeymoon was soon to be over. Although The Magnificent Seven was eventually to become an international success, back in 1960, even some of the stars believed they had a major flop on their hands.
When we were filming, we thought this is going to be a real bummer. We have no script. We've got a Japanese story that doesn't necessarily appeal to Americans, we thought. And we've got a Mongolian guy from Brooklyn playing American cowboy named Yul Brynner. We said, this is going to be really bad.
It didn't happen right away, in America anyway. We got kind of a general release from United Artists. I don't know who was the head of United Artists at that time, but he didn't have any faith in it at all. But it played, in a general release for a week or so, and then was just kind of closed down. I was really disappointed with that. And then when in Europe it became a hit. Became a big hit. And, then it came back through America and we started playing again, and they decided, well, maybe we got something here we should use, and it's been playing ever since. Isn't that strange how that things work?
Kurosawa was a big fan of The Magnificent Seven, and after he saw the picture, he spoke to John a couple of times on the phone and was very complimentary and thought he loved it and did not want to indulge in how does this compare to his own, Kurosawa's own film. He just took it as a Western and said it works really well.
The Magnificent Seven has gone on to become the second most played film on American TV, and Elmer Bernstein's main theme has become one of the most recognizable in movie history.
John suggested Elmer. Elmer was very young at the time, very early in his career, and he gave us one of the great themes in movie history.
I had, for many, many years, been interested in folk music, both American and Mexican folk music. But when the Magnificent Seven came along, it was wonderful for me in that I was able to use a lot of thoughts that I had stored up over the years.
He did it. It was there, and the orchestra played it, and we said, great. And we were very enthusiastic about it from the very beginning.
The music behind it, yeah. So we had a great score, too. Wow. Elmer wrote a really good score.
The rhythmic underpinning, that was the important thing. And I got that early on. I remember being very thrilled when I came across that. I thought, this is really exciting, The tune itself, I thought, was much less interesting than the kind of the rhythmic input, and I think that's what people really remember.
A great score lifts the whole movie up 2-3 notches, and Elmer Bernstein's score is, to me, the greatest Western score there ever was.
I once said to Elmer Bernstein, who wrote the music, I wish I'd heard the music at the beginning of the film. I would have ridden my horse better.
But it starts right in that introductory sequence. Once they move the wagon and up to the cemetery, and then they head down the hill, you're just lifted out of your seat by that score.
Boys, a drinks from me.
Bernstein's score was nominated for an Academy Award. The film's screenplay was largely ignored.
It's a wonderful script. It's very economical. I've seen the movie, 20, 25 times, and I'm always surprised by how economical it is.
Hey, I'd like to buy you a drink. I'm your friend, too.
Thanks.
Where you from? Oh, yeah. Where you going?
Your memory of it is that, there's a big scene about this, but there's not. There's a great line about that, and there's a great response to that line.
What I don't understand is why a man like you took the job in the first place. Why, huh?
I wonder myself.
No, come on, tell me why.
Like a fella I once knew in El Paso. One day he just took all his clothes off and jumped in a mess of cactus. I asked him the same question, why?
And?
He said it seemed to be a good idea at the time.
There was one line, one exchange that I remember. I remembered since I was 12 years old. All the women have been kept away from the gunfighters. And the question is, where are they? And one of the old men says, well, we're afraid you're going to rape them. And Yul Brynner says,
well, we might. In my opinion, though, you might have given us the benefit of the doubt.
I thought, man, is that cool? You never hear Western characters, your heroes, talk like that.
There's been a lot written about the who really deserves the credit. Whether Walter Newman came in and what he did, probably a lot.
Now, Walter Newman's version is really the version that we've all seen on the screen. And Walter does not, his credit is not seen on the screen as the writer because he decided to pull his credit.
Well, as the necessity for rewrites occurred while we were on location because of the censors, we required some rewriting, and we asked Walter to come and join us on location. And for reasons of his own, he found it impossible to come to Mexico at that time.
A new writer, William Roberts, joined the production in Mexico as a script doctor. Later, in arbitration with the Writers Guild, it was decided that Roberts had done enough to receive a co-writing credit on the movie.
Walter Newman, who felt he deserved a sole credit, was infuriated at that and said that rather than share his credit with anyone, he would rather have his name off the film. It really is a tragedy that Walter, who had written such a brilliant script, does not have his name on the film.
The movie-going public knew nothing of this battle for credits, but they knew what they liked, and so 3 sequels were made: Return of the Seven in 1966, Guns of the Magnificent Seven in 1969, and The Magnificent Seven Ride in 1972. A television series followed over 20 years later.
Having seen it recently, I think that really that Magnificent Seven, the dialogue in the screenplay, is a template for almost every single action western and action movie that came since. The definition of the heroes, the flawed heroes, I mean, it's so classic that it almost becomes generic now when you see it, but you don't realize at the time how extraordinary it was, how new it was.
What do they say, that imitation is the highest form of flattery? There have been any number of movies that have been made which really lifted the whole notion of the Magnificent Seven.
It was one of the first films that began to move toward another type of Western. It wasn't in the grand Western style like John Ford or John Huston. It was a totally different type of Western, a Western that was heading toward the style of Sergio Leone, who would come later. But The Magnificent Seven was the first.
Though they were all to hang up their Stetsons in their later careers, it was the Magnificent Seven that put them all on the road to stardom.
Everybody was very unusual and very different and very new. Even Steve was new for movie audiences, and Steve was very compelling on screen. And Coburn went on to demonstrate his considerable magnetism on screen, and everybody just came off very well in their first shot at a big movie.
Some genre movies become transcendent because, like all movies, some magical combination of things happen. And in Magnificent Seven, you have a bunch of actors who were about to make a huge impression on the culture. They had started to with this movie. One of the greatest scores ever. And a story that has enormous universal resonance. So you get this combination of things that sort of lifts the genre picture out of the pack.
Buenas noches.
There's so many other Westerns that traded on action, and nobody seriously cared about the outcome of the movie. And the other thing the movie had, it made a most interesting statement at the end of the movie. It went beyond just being a straight action movie. If you remember the film, Yul Brynner turns to Steve McQueen and says,
"The old man was right. Only the farmers won. We lost. We always lose."
What a way of saying that this glamorous image of the freelance cowboy, in the end, really is a lost person, has no family, and the one member of the seven, Horsebook Court, who remains behind is the lucky one. And that moved me enormously, and I think that elevated the level of this movie. It said something beyond we have an obligation to help people who are unable to help themselves.
It touches on everything that we deal with today. So it's timeless. It's a timeless piece because it talks about universal themes. You don't have to be a cowboy to have those kind of feelings they have. Whether to settle down, whether to go get married, whether to be wild. And I think that's why it touches on us. And emotionally, it's like lightning in a bottle, No one ever knows why a movie does that. It just does it. And you look at it and you cherish it and you go, God bless, and you try to do it again.
It's so easy to enjoy this movie. Is it the greatest Western of all time? No. Is it the most transforming Western? No. Is it the most fun? Yes.
I think the operative word was magic, because when all those elements come together and they worked, it's magic.